Let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the architectural blueprints of global governments. And don't worry, we're skipping the heavy legal jargon. Think of a country like a massive, complex building. Just like a towering skyscraper needs a solid foundation to stay standing, a nation needs fundamental rules. Today, we're looking at a comparative study that breaks down 4 major constitutional traditions across the globe to see exactly what keeps these massive political structures upright. But before we kick off this world tour, I want you to really think about something. What actually makes a nation's foundation? I mean, if you were handed a completely blank piece of paper right now and asked to design the fundamental rules to build a country from scratch, what would you prioritize? What are the absolute bare minimum load-bearing walls a society needs to just function, maintain order, and evolve? Well, according to the research we're analyzing today, it really comes down to 5 core elements. You've got a nation's historical development, its underlying constitutional philosophy, the specific political institutions it creates, the locus of sovereignty, basically where the ultimate power lies, and how it protects individual rights. Every single country we're about to look at tackles these 5 elements, but the way they arrange them, totally unique. So here's our flight itinerary for today's architectural tour. We'll start with the constitutional blueprints, then hit the UK's uncodified tradition, followed by the US as the written pioneer. Next up is France's Fifth Republic, China's socialist constitutionalism, and we'll wrap up with the value of comparison. Section 1. The UK, the uncodified tradition, a living, breathing framework. Okay, we need to clear up a super common misconception right off the bat. The UK has an uncodified constitution. Now, that does not mean it's unwritten. It simply means the fundamental rules aren't all stuffed into one single document that's locked away in some glass case. Instead, the framework is pulled together from multiple different places that have just layered on top of each other over centuries. It's really fascinating. So, if it's not one single document, where exactly do these rules live? Well, the UK framework is actually woven together from 5 distinct sources. It relies on formal statutes passed by the legislature, blended with these unwritten historical conventions. Then you add in common law and judicial decisions shaped by courts over time, and finally, authoritative texts written by respected experts. It's an organically evolving blueprint. When you step back and look at how this all holds together, the central, load-bearing pillar is something called parliamentary sovereignty. In the UK system, the main idea is that Parliament is supreme. They are the ultimate authority. Since there's no single entrenched document holding them back, Parliament literally has the ultimate power to make or unmake any law. It's the core concept holding up their entire framework. And this sets up a brilliant contrast as we pivot to our next destination. While the UK concentrates power heavily through that parliamentary sovereignty, the United States takes a fundamentally different engineering approach. They rely on a mechanical division of power through separation and checks and balances. It's just a completely different structural philosophy. Section 2. The US, the written pioneer, designing the modern republic. 1787. I really want to emphasize this year because it is incredibly significant. The United States Constitution, drafted in 1787, is actually the world's oldest written constitution currently in force. Unlike the UK's sprawling, multi-sourced system, the US locked its fundamental blueprint down into one single, cohesive text at a very specific moment in history. And remarkably, it's remained the operating system for the country ever since. To manage political institutions and prevent tyranny, that 1787 document engineered some very specific structural mechanisms. It uses federalism to divide power between the national and state levels, and a separation of powers to split the federal government itself into distinct branches. It binds them all together with checks and balances and judicial review, all while explicitly outlining individual liberties in a Bill of Rights. It's a highly engineered, deliberately divided machine. Section 3. France, the Fifth Republic, a mid-century redesign. Moving right along, the current French blueprint is known as the Constitution of the Fifth Republic, established in 1958. Our source notes that, mechanically, this redesign shifted the French government into what's called a semi-presidential system. Essentially, this means they have a structural setup that shares executive power, which makes it distinct from both the UK's parliamentary focus and the pure presidential model we just saw in the US. But, beyond the nuts and bolts, a constitution is driven by its philosophy. The French Constitution explicitly reflects these deep-seated principles: liberty, equality, fraternity, and republicanism. These aren't just buzzwords. According to our source material, these values act as the true moral and ideological foundation of the French Republic. They're the spirit that actually breathes life into that 1958 institutional framework.
Section 4. China, Socialist Constitutionalism, Modernization and Framework.
Let's fast forward a bit to 1982. This year demonstrates a surprisingly modern timeline for China's current constitutional framework. I mean, while the country's history is obviously ancient, the specific governing operating system they're currently using to drive their political institutions is just a few decades old. Based directly on our source study, the 1982 Constitution relies on a foundation of socialist constitutionalism. Crucially, the blueprint explicitly establishes the leadership of the Communist Party as the central framework for governance. And this architecture has a very specific overarching goal: steering the country's rapid modernization. It's a unified, highly focused architectural model designed to drive development through centralized leadership.
Section 5. The value of comparison. Why studying these blueprints matters.
Stepping back to synthesize everything we've looked at, the contrasts are pretty dramatic. You've got the uncodified evolution of the UK sitting right next to the pioneering 1787 document of the US. Then France's mid-century semi-presidential redesign contrasts heavily with China's 1982 socialist constitutionalism. It just goes to show that completely different histories, political cultures, and ideologies result in totally unique structural designs. There really is no single correct way to build a government.
And that leads us to the ultimate conclusion from the source material. Why does all this actually matter? Well, because comparative study is the key to truly understanding how global governance actually works in the real world. By looking at these diverse traditions, we gain a much deeper understanding of constitutional development itself. It allows us to step outside our own borders for a minute and objectively see the mechanics of how different societies choose to organize power, protect rights, and maintain order. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How does your nation's history shape the rules you live by today? Take a look at the laws, the political systems, and the rights you experience daily, and realize they aren't just random. They're the direct result of an architectural blueprint drafted by your country's unique past. Next time you read the news, try to see that underlying constitutional framework at play. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the blueprints around you.